Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Macklin Celebrini as we begin my San Jose Sharks 24-25 player reviews. And as per usual, I'll be starting off with the highest graded players and working my way down to the lowest graded players. And unsurprisingly, Celebrini finds himself at the top of the list. And this is also very good timing because it was just a couple of days ago that the Calder Trophy winner was announced, and it was not Celebrini who won. Instead, it was Montreal Canadiens defenseman Lane Hutson. But not only that, Celebrini actually ended up being third place, even behind Calgary Flames goaltender Dustin Wolf. So this would be viewed as somewhat disappointing by some Sharks fans, and I imagine even Celebrini isn't particularly happy with this actual result. But it is important to mention that the Calder Trophy is not the end-all be-all of a player's career. Two of the best players of the last 20 years, and honestly two of the best players of all time, Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby, neither of them actually won the Calder Trophy in their respective rookie seasons. McDavid missed a large chunk of his due to injury, so he just wasn't quite eligible to get it. And then when it comes to Sidney Crosby, he simply lost straight up, head-to-head with Alex Ovechkin. And yet, as we know, they've had immense amount of success through their career, even with that trophy missing from their trophy case. For an example that hits perhaps closer to home, you go back to 2011, where Logan Couture was the runner-up in the Calder Trophy race to Hurricanes at the time forward Jeff Skinner. And if you now look 14 years into the future, Jeff Skinner has made the postseason just a single time. That was this season, and he's been a healthy scratch for about 90% of those games. Compare that to Logan Couture, whose career has unfortunately come to an end, and yet he made the playoffs many different seasons. And he was not only a good player there, he was an elite playoff performer. I would take Logan Couture over Jeff Skinner 10 times out of 10. And so yes, the Calder Trophy evaluates who had the best rookie season, but it is not necessarily an indication of who will end up being the best rookie, who will end up having the best NHL career, and the odds-on favorite for that, at the very least, is probably Celebrini at this point. But putting the Calder Trophy to the side and discussing what exactly happened with Celebrini this season, there were a lot of expectations on him coming into the year. No surprise, as you would expect from the first overall pick. It was thought he would make the jump immediately to the NHL, but the actual impact that he would have was still somewhat questionable. And I think the hype levels about Celebrini were not quite as high, and this is because there was a little bit of that fatigue from the previous year with the Bedard mania situation. All throughout the 22-23 season, it was Bedard this, Bedard that he was going to end up being the best player in the NHL, that the torch would be passed from McDavid to Bedard. He was going to take up that mantle as the new face of the NHL. He put up absurd numbers in the WHL, crazy numbers at the World Juniors with Team Canada. It was really thought as though that this was going to be his future. And once he got drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks, indeed his rookie season was very impressive, putting up a close to point per game year on an absolutely awful Chicago team. And so going through the 23-24 season, obviously you eventually have to move on, and there was the hype about Macklin Celebrini, but it was always kind of caveated with, yeah, but he's not quite as good as Connor Bedard. So it was quite clear that he was going to be that first pick. Even once the Sharks won the draft lottery, Mike Greer made it no secret that he was going to be grabbing Celebrini. That is in stark contrast to this season's draft, where every single general manager and team is very tight-lipped about what direction they're leaning on in the draft. It shows how far ahead Celebrini was, but again, maybe you're expecting in that 50-point range in his first season, because Celebrini was always viewed as the more well-rounded, two-way type of first overall pick, and that might take a couple of years to grow into that role compared to offensively when you can make that impact right away at 18. But those thoughts were immediately squished in the just first game of the season as Celebrini comes in, home opener, first career game against the St. Louis Blues, and just a few minutes into it shows off his creativity and his willingness to make plays as he goes for the spinorama no-look pass trying to find teammate William Eklund, but the puck instead deflects into the net, ending up as his first career goal. Just a few minutes later, he finds Tyler Toffoli with a really nice pass from behind the net, gets his first career assist, and he has 2 points in just the first period of his NHL career. Absolutely absurd for him. Now, unfortunately, Celebrini would end up losing that game with the Sharks and then getting injured and not playing the next 12 games, and that would actually have a huge impact on his Calder campaign, one of the major reasons why he would end up losing out. But once he did become healthy again, it did not take very long for him to return to that level, and the points continued to flow, ultimately finishing 63 points, 25 goals, 38 assists in 70 games. If he had played a full 82-game season, probably around the 70-point mark, maybe even the 30-goal mark, which would obviously be absolutely crazy, especially when you consider the context of the fact that Celebrini was just 18 years old for the entirety of this season. Now, obviously, whenever a player gets drafted, the immediate after is that they are getting drafted at around 18 years old. You expect that. But the thing is that, as I always talk about when it comes to these drafts, there's a difference between an early birthday and a late birthday. Someone like Austin Matthews back in 2016, he turned 19 near the beginning of his rookie season as an October birthday. Celebrini, his is in that off season. So he was 18 the whole year and still managed to put up these extremely impressive offensive numbers. But the thing is that just looking at him offensively, it's obviously fantastic, showcases some truly elite potential. But what really elevates him to being not just an elite prospect, but a special kind of franchise cornerstone type of player is the other aspects of his game. As we move from the offensive side to the defensive side, it is no secret that there were some struggles in this area for Celebrini, in particular when it comes to his just general defensive awareness. He is not quite at that top level when it comes to anticipating plays in the defensive zone, and so sometimes he ends up getting a little bit lost and a little bit out of position. This is perhaps a reason for why he does end up having this -31 plus-minus rating. Obviously, there is a little bit of misleading in terms of this stat. It can be a bit unlucky. Sometimes you have no impact on the play and you end up getting a minus. Sometimes you have a huge impact on the play and it ends up as a minus. Those are not made the same, but still it's not the greatest rating, and so it does showcase some issues in this area. But the big thing about Celebrini defensively is his willingness to actually compete in these areas. This is not the case for a lot of young players. For many of them, they make it to the NHL strictly off of their offensive capability. They have dominated the league that they played their draft year in, whether that be the CHL or the NCAA or overseas in Sweden or in Russia or whatever the case may be. They have dominated those leagues, and so it is enough to carry them into the NHL, but actually getting the other well-rounded aspects of their game, that takes some time. So you look at a player like Connor Bedard this past season, 2 years in the NHL thus far, really solid numbers, but defensively he struggles considerably. You look at a player like Jack Hughes, very similar situations. You look at a player even like Connor McDavid back in 2015. Defensively, he was quite hit or miss for the first few seasons of his career, even though right now he would be considered elite in that particular area, making back-to-back Stanley Cup finals with the Edmonton Oilers. So to see Macklin Celebrini be able to have that compete level and that want to not just make the difference offensively but also defensively is really, really impressive. And while I mentioned that when the puck is away from him, he's not the greatest in his own zone, when the puck is near him, he will get into those immense puck battles and usually come out on top. He was one of the best puck battle winners in the entire league this season on a per game basis, which again, as an 18-year-old is absolutely absurd. And it is not the only micro stat that he found success in. His ability to also carry the puck in with possession, controlled zone entry, moving back more so to the offensive side, is also very, very great. You think about how a lot of teams are forced to dump the puck in and try to go for those retrievals. To have a player who is so skilled and can actually carry the puck over the blue line with possession to create a rush chance or just to get some zone time, it is extremely valuable, and Celebrini has that capability in him. And to further hammer home the point here of Celebrini being this do-it-all type of player, we see his time on ice, first of all, 19 minutes and 47 seconds. This is despite not really getting much penalty killing time. That is a role he will eventually grow into, absolutely, but it's something that Warsofsky didn't want to burden him with just yet, and yet he's still coming close to that 20-minute per game mark as an 18-year-old. Absurd. But it is the face-off percentage here that I do want to focus in on. Now, it doesn't look very impressive on the surface here, 48.2%. That is below half. He loses more face-offs than he has won this season. But the face-off game is kind of like its own different level. It is not the same as actual hockey, and what ends up happening here is that there are players who are not necessarily all that great fourth liners, but who can be elite players in the face-off dot. Look at a guy like Nico Sturm, former San Jose Shark, over 60% in this area, and yet he's not much more than a fourth liner when it comes to his actual fully completed game. And so Celebrini focusing and trying to improve in this area, even as that 18-year-old, and already being at this level is really impressive. If you compare him to every single previous first overall pick center since 2005 with Crosby, he has the highest faceoff percentage in his rookie season. That is above guys like Tavares, McKinnon, McDavid, Crosby, Hughes, Bedard, Hischier, whatever the case may be. Celebrini is right up there. This is not a player who wants any aspect of his game slacking. He really truly wants to be the best in every possible area. Even one final point here before we move closer to that grade is the fact that Celebrini, look, physically, he's not exactly throwing the body constantly. His hit numbers aren't quite up there, but for anyone who has seen Celebrini this season, this is not a soft player by any means. He is willing to get physically engaged. There was one very, famous play, sort of, at least if you're a Sharks fan. I believe it was against the Buffalo Sabres, where he is racing after the puck in the corner in the offensive zone. He's racing after a Sabres player, but you see Celebrini let up slightly to allow the Sabres player to win the race to the puck, and then immediately as he touches it, Celebrini just shoves him off, knocks him down, and grabs possession for himself. It shows a tremendous amount of strength to be able to do that, and it is not the only time this season that we have seen Celebrini out-muscle a player. I mean, there's a reason why he manages to be near the tops of the leagues in terms of puck battles won per game, is because he does have that strength that you don't expect from an 18-year-old player. So again, every single aspect, fantastic for Macklin Celebrini. And I do want to further emphasize at this point, I have mentioned it so many times, 18 years old, it just further increases how amazing this achievement is. You take a look at the Calder Trophy winner this season, Lane Hutson, 20 years old at the beginning of the year, turned 21, I believe, around February. Dustin Wolf, even older than that by a few years. And I mentioned that just a few months can be a big difference maker developmentally. Now we're talking a couple of years. Celebrini is only going to get better from here. Theoretically, one way you could phrase it is that this is the worst we're going to see Celebrini at for many, many seasons, because you can expect that upward trajectory to continue. It's not guaranteed. For instance, we saw Bedard kind of stagnate a little bit this season in his sophomore year, but Celebrini, it is certainly possible that it just continues to get better and better. And so when it comes to his grade on the season, one might think with all of this praise that I would be giving him an A+. There is one thing that does stand in the way of that, which is simply just his puck possession, his care for the puck. He will mention this himself, but he was a player who would frequently give the puck away this season. In fact, second in the league in terms of giveaways per 60 minutes out of players who have played a relevant amount of time this season. That's not great. Those are numbers that do need to come down. But all in all, pretty much everything else heavily exceeded expectations. And as I said earlier on, he is not just a great prospect. He is a very, very special player. He'll get the grade of an A. Class dismissed.